Good afternoon and welcome to the City of Indio study session. I'm Wayman Furman, the mayor of the city. I'll be chairing the study session. Could I have a roll call, please?
Yes, Mayor. For the record, all members of the council are present.
Okay, if I could ask us all please to stand, and if Mayor Pro Tem will lead us in the pledge to the flag.
Sure. Right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the next item is item number 3. It's public comment. Do we have any public comment, clerk?
Do you have a card? Mayor, I have Ana Vargas. Is this for this item? You want to approach the podium?
This is for items not on the, is it not on the agenda?
Right, it's going to be regarding the discussions.
So it's
Oh, let's just wait. Oh, hold
so
on,
it'll be
please.
the next, okay.
So none for this item. Mayor.
No, okay. I don't have any either. So we'll move on to item number 4, which are discussion items. That's item 4.1, pro housing strategies discussion. And city manager, who would be handling this?
Mr. Snyder, our community development director, will help introduce the consultant team, and then we'll have an open discussion with the council on the topic.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of City Council. Kevin Snyder, Director of Community Development. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this afternoon. As the council is aware, the City of Indio received state certification of its housing element on April 21st, 2022. That was phase 1 of a 2-phase project. The second phase was to discuss with council and possibly bring forward for action at a later date pro-housing strategies. This afternoon, I have Elizabeth Dixon and Erica Van Sickle with DUDEC. You've seen them before. They're going to facilitate a presentation. We're going to keep it short so that there's plenty of opportunity for the council to give their thoughts and feedback. But certainly during the presentation, if there's any questions or any clarifications that you need, please feel free to ask. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth and Erica, and they're going to take you through the presentation. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? I know there was some issues first time. Okay, great, thanks. So good afternoon, everyone. I believe we've all met at this point, council members, but I just want to reintroduce Elizabeth and I in just one moment. So thank you for joining us today. Next slide. So just a quick overview of the project team. We have Kevin Snyder, of course. We have Alyssa Suarez, and from the DUDEC consulting side, we have myself, Erica Van Sickle, and Elizabeth Dixon. Next slide. So just as a quick agenda, we have current conditions, a pro-housing overview, housing opportunities, and discussion. And so next slide. Let's get right into it because I know we are short on time. So I just wanted to start off, going into development trends quickly. I know we've discussed these numbers before during the housing element update process, but I wanted to give a very high level refresher of the housing development trends during the 2014 to 2021 housing element cycle, which is called the 5th cycle. And so as you see on the slide, the graph on the left shows the city's 5th cycle regional housing needs allocation, which we refer to as the RHNA, compared to the units that were actually permitted during the cycle, which are shown in blue. So without diving into the numbers too much, it's clear that the city fell short in reaching its lower and moderate income RHNA targets during the 5th cycle. So jumping ahead to the city's RHNA numbers for the current 6th cycle housing element, which are shown on the right, you can see how the RHNA numbers have increased considerably across all 3 income categories for the current 6th cycle, for a total of 7,812 units. So while we aren't focusing on these exact numbers today, it's important to consider how the city is planning to meet the current housing need across all income levels and think about what might need to change in order to get there. Next slide, please. Great. So we know the city has to plan for almost 8,000 units across the income categories. So let's take a quick look at how the RHNA income categories might look across a housing spectrum based on median incomes. So as you can see, there's a very diverse spectrum of housing. We have supportive housing, income-based, rent-restricted rental housing, market rate rental housing, and of course, more of a home ownership option. This is, of course, a very simplified graphic, and the housing types and income levels will vary from what is shown here, but it gives you a general understanding of what we're talking about. Next slide, please. So now let's dive into income in Indio specifically. So when we talk about income levels and affordability, we really need to think about what that means in the context of the city, right? So to start off, we have the area median income, which we refer to as AMI, which is about $53,000 per year for the city of Indio. It's then further broken down by household size. So in comparison, we see the county's AMI in the table below is approximately $87,000 per year. So I want to explain why we're both looking at the city and the county AMI. So each year, the state publishes income limits for every county in the state, and those are calculated based on specific percentages of the county AMI. So these state income levels are then used to determine max rents and affordability levels for applicants for state, federal, and some local affordable housing programs. So because of this, it's important we consider both the county and the city's AMI specifically. Transition, so just click next, Elizabeth, please. Thank you. So here we can see where Indio's 2- and 4-person household AMIs fall in comparison to the county's income limits. So both AMIs are below the county's at about 90% of the county AMI for their respective household sizes. So they're significantly closer to the lower income upper limit. And taking a step back, we need to remember that the AMI is the median income, right? So meaning 50% of households make less and 50% of households make more. So that means that the vast majority of the city's households fall into the lower or moderate income categories instead of the above moderate when you're considering the county's AMIs. Next slide, please. So now that we generally understand incomes, I want to consider the cost of housing specific to Indio. So starting off with the housing market trends, I won't go into too much detail because I think we all know housing prices have gone up incredibly over the last 5 years. But just generally, they were about 290,000 on average in 2018, and they have increased to about 550,000 in the last 5 years. So assuming a 20% down payment, your income must be approximately $100,000 a year to afford a home in Indio right now. But based on the city's AMIs, only about 1/5 of all households are making that income. And so, oh, not yet. Okay. I'll let you know. Thank you. So here we see the median rents for the city, moving on to the bottom table. So they range from about 880 to about 2,000, depending on the number of bedrooms in the unit. So just as a very quick refresher, we define rent burdened households as spending more than 30% of annual income on housing. So based on that, these are the required annual incomes for a household to afford the median rent without being considered rent burden. So the city's AMI, as you can see, falls a few thousand above the annual income for a 2-bedroom apartment to not be rent burden. So that generally, very generally means that those households making less than the AMI, as shown in the red text, are going to face rent burden or overcrowding if they require more than 2 bedrooms. Next slide, please. Perfect. So moving on to the cost of developments, this is a slide we've seen before. As I hope many of you remember, London Motor Advisors developed some development prototype scenarios last year, which we presented to you in a joint session. So just as a very quick refresher, here's a summary of the development costs that were assessed based on your land use designations, including permitted housing types and density. So as you can see, the construction costs are provided for each prototype and then further broken down by unit and gross square foot. Click next. Thank you. But I want to draw your attention specifically to the connected neighborhood, mixed use, and midtown prototypes, because these are the housing types and densities that are typically that typically lend themselves to lower and moderate income households. So I know densities and income levels can still be a bit abstract. So let's look at them, in terms of actual housing types. Next slide, please. So I guess taking a step back, historically, the building industry, the industry has seen Indio as a one housing type market, really large lots, gated single family homes, as you can see in the existing, building footprint of the city. But it's clear that building exclusively large single family homes is not going to meet the needs of everyone in Indio. And those needs, of course, include, your typical affordable and market rate housing, but the city also has a need for more diverse housing types. And so these diverse housing types are often referred to as missing middle housing. And so missing middle housing refers to diverse housing types that fall somewhere between a single family and a mid-rise apartment building, as you see in the graphic, and can include townhomes, duplexes, quadplexes, and live-work apartments, for example. And so these are some housing types that can be expected in the connected neighborhood, mixed use in Midtown that I pointed out on the development cost slide. So these are really important. They can expand the diversity of housing along a spectrum of affordability, especially in lower density neighborhoods. And they can also provide solutions to address any mismatch between the available housing stock and any unmet or shifting needs, especially in terms of moderate income families or households. Next slide, please. And so very quickly, jumping back into the development costs one last time, here's an overview of how costs are typically broken down for any development project. So while there are several factors that the city can't affect, and those are the ones in blue, there are certain development costs that the city can potentially play a role in indirectly or directly reducing. And so those factors are shown in red, and they're the only ones I'm going to go over really quickly. So we have soft costs, and those are costs associated with, inspections, permits, taxes. We have time, right? The present value of money. So there's always a cost associated with any delays due to processes associated with, permits or government regulations. Then we have impact fees such as permits, entitlement processing, et cetera. And then land costs. Land costs are broken down, but for our purpose, we're just thinking of the general cost to purchase the property or the land to be developed. I know that was a lot, so if you have any questions, we can always review any of the slides during the discussion portion. But for now, I'm going to turn things back over to Elizabeth so we can really get a grasp, on what this all means for pro-housing and how these factors can potentially be changed through policies.
All right, thanks, Erica. So now that Erica has provided us with the foundation really of this pro-housing work, I want to dive into the specifics of what pro-housing is, how to achieve pro-housing, and why pro-housing is important. So first, what is pro-housing? It's important to first distinguish the difference between pro-housing as a set of values paired with actions, and then separately as a state designation. So first, pro-housing is a set of values backed by actions to address the city's housing needs through the facilitation of the planning, approval, and construction of housing. The city has already demonstrated through its housing element that its values are aligned with being pro-housing, in that you have adopted policies and programs that aim to facilitate and increase housing production. The next step is to then pair those values with actions. The second note here for the state designation is a formal designation through the state's pro-housing program. So the state designates cities and counties as pro-housing through a non-competitive program that awards those jurisdictions that commit to the implementation of pro-housing strategies. The designation provides increased access to grant funding. This includes grants for infrastructure, transportation, and climate initiatives, and is expected to be expanded to other state grants. So you may be asking, isn't Indio already pro-housing? Well, while the city's values are aligned with the pro-housing vision to facilitate housing production, as seen in the recently adopted housing element, which aims to incentivize and facilitate multifamily development, increase housing opportunities, create by right or ministerial development opportunities, and reduce constraints to development. To be pro-housing, these values must be demonstrated through action. Further, to be formally recognized as pro-housing by the state, this requires a formal application and a commitment to implement pro-housing actions within 2 years. So given that as a city, you already hold pro-housing values, how could you achieve a formal pro-housing designation? You would achieve this designation through a commitment to implement pro-housing actions within 2 years of submitting a pro-housing designation application, which of course will require a commitment to the staffing and financial resources needed to implement programs that facilitate the planning, approval, and construction of housing. The state's pro-housing actions are grouped into 4 scoring categories, which are listed on the slide here under the pro-housing program, and cities must commit to at least one policy in each of the 4 categories, which provides points, requiring a score of at least 30 points across all 4 categories. So these categories are favorable land zoning and land use, accelerating production timeframes, reducing construction and development costs, and providing financial subsidies. So why pro-housing and why does this matter for Indio? Really looking beyond achieving a pro-housing designation from the state and of course those preferential grant scoring system that it provides, which would of course increase access to funding in the city. The implementation of pro-housing values can help the city facilitate housing production in a manner that meets the needs of your community. As you saw earlier in this presentation, the city's housing need, as reflected by the RHNA, is substantial. And based on development trends, the RHNA will not be achieved without advancing the city's pro-housing values into action. Implementation of pro-housing strategies can help you achieve your RHNA, implement your housing element, and facilitate the production of a variety of housing types for all affordability levels. Because being pro-housing is not just about providing some affordable units, it's about facilitating diverse housing production of both market rate and affordable housing to meet the needs of your community. Through the city's new zoning ordinance coming to you in the next few months, the city is taking a number of steps to be pro-housing already. However, in order to implement the housing element and be considered a pro-housing city, we are going to focus on what else can be done to help you turn your values into actions. So I'm now going to pass things back over to Erica.
Perfect. Thank you, Elizabeth. Next slide. So the big question. So what are we doing to actually, pursue these pro-housing strategies? Well, we're currently working to develop a pro-housing strategies plan. And so as we we've previously went over, we're looking at all the development trends and the funding opportunities in the city to look for levels of opportunity to expand those or to, find new funding opportunities. And so once we've done that, we'll present those at a future session. And then we're also simultaneously doing an assessment of the current housing policies in the city, really identifying any strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, or constraints that might exist. And then we're going to develop a recommended pro-housing policy plan, right? And so looking at all the strategies that can be implemented to enable affordable housing development in the city. So let's take a look at what some of those policies might look like. Next slide, please. So as Elizabeth went over, there are 4 pro-housing policy categories. So I want to provide examples of policies under each category to really get everyone thinking before the discussion. So here's the first of the 4 policy categories, zoning and land use. And so the city is actively working on many of the policies in this category already as compared to the other 3 categories, but there are always actions the city can continue to take to expand, right? And so some examples the city can take include amending your local density bonus program to exceed state requirements by 10% or more, reducing or eliminating parking requirements, specifically for ADUs, or adopting parking requirements at or less the current ratio in state law, or establishing a workforce opportunity zone or housing sustainability district. And these are state programs that provide state grant opportunities in exchange for the city establishing upfront zoning and streamlined environmental review for the specific zone or the district created. Next slide, please. And these are not in any particular order, but second category, so accelerated housing production timeframe. So the city can establish streamlined program level CEQA analysis and certification of general plans, community plans, specific plans with accompanying EIRs, environmental impact reports, and related documents. Or the city can establish permit processing under 4 months or limit hearings for any project to 3 or fewer. Or the city can create a priority permit processing for ADUs, JADUs, multifamily, or affordable homes, affordable to lower or moderate income households. And that would also include, reduced plan check times. Next slide, please. So the third category, reducing construction and development costs. Some examples can include waiver, reduction of development fees, impact fee waivers or reductions or fee deferrals, as you see on the screen. So important to note, one thing to keep in mind, however, is that other local government revenues must be relied on to backfill any revenues that may be lost due to waivers. So good to think about that. And then another example is adopting universal design ordinances pursuant to state law. And so that would help improve, the number of units that are accessible to those who may have special needs in the city, or creating a plan for pre-approved or prototype plans for missing middle housing types. And those, as we've already seen, but they may also include manufactured homes or recreational vehicles, park models, et cetera. And that helps to reduce development costs overall. Next slide, thank you. And so last but not least, the fourth category, providing financial subsidies. So this can include the establishment of a local housing trust fund or collaboration on a regional housing trust fund. This can include prioritization of local general funds directly for affordable housing, or using residual redevelopment funds for affordable housing, actually allocating and using those, or establishing an enhanced infrastructure financing district or similar local financing tool to the extent feasible, of course, and specifically using those funds to directly support housing developments. And as a note, the pro-housing policies also allow for other actions that are not listed under the specific categories, but that quantifiably promote and that can be proven to accelerate the whatever category that you want to promote. And so next slide, please. Perfect. So Elizabeth, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right. So thanks, Erica, and thanks to the council for really taking in all this information. I know that was a lot. We're going to shift into the discussion portion now, and we do have a few prompting questions that we're going to go through because we really want to have a dialogue on what your thoughts are on pro-housing, both from implementation perspective and the state designation perspective, what you would like the pro-housing strategies plan to consider, and how you want to prioritize the pro-housing efforts. But again, these are prompting questions, so we of course are open to all comments, questions, any of those things. So I'll just start us off with the first one here. What are your thoughts on obtaining a pro-housing designation from the state?
Elizabeth, what I'd like to do is call up some of our speakers and let them pose some concerns and questions as well. And then we could go into the discussion with staff, and staff can also address not staff, I'm sorry, our council. We can also address that as well. So if we could pivot a little bit from the discussion point and start on our public comments, and then that'll give us a time to address any of the concerns or what kind of vision we have for this designation. So I'd like to start off by calling Ms. Anna Vargas up for a public comment.
Hello, good afternoon, Mayor Furman, Mayor Pro Tem Ortiz, and members of the council. I'm Annalisa Vargas, resident of Indio and lead organizer with Communities for New California Education Fund. And as a resident and organizer, I'm a strong advocate for housing for all. And I've been involved in the process through the housing element update, the workshops that were provided, and just engaging our residents. We have a neighborhood committee that meets monthly and discusses housing and other priority concerns. So we are focusing on housing for our low income and extremely low income families that we know have experienced a lot of rent burden. And as part of we're having these conversation, a lot of community members brought up, the making sure that we're applying for opportunities and making the city of Indio more viable, a candidate, right? That there's I know that our neighboring city, like the city of Coachella, has new housing projects that reflect that. And some of the issues that in our neighborhood committee meeting have come up are like, for example, affordable housing for our retired migrant farm workers or farm worker families, also multi-use housing. So for example, or mixed housing. So one of the, in a letter that CNC provided, one of the ideas was to end exclusionary zoning and adopt more inclusionary zoning in certain areas, like for example, Indio 92203, and currently it's zoned for mostly single family homes or larger estates. But if there would be a way to include other, so through inclusionary zoning, that would help alleviate some of those issues as well. So part of the, so happy to participate in that process, and that your housing element was certified by the state. However, time and time again, our residents have told us about the immense need for affordable housing, and we want to ensure that the RHNA numbers planned for the city's housing element are met. And so one of those ways is to earn the HCD pro housing designation, which will unlock additional funds that can be brought to our community to build such types of affordable housing. And as an Indio resident advocate for the Eastern Coachella Valley, I urge you to show your commitment by providing affordable housing for all by directing your staff to apply for the pro housing designation. And just want to reiterate that we already, and in Indio, another issue I see a lot is overcrowdedness, and some of our already existing apartments and duplexes are in need of rehab. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next public comment is Jose Gardenas. Is that it?
Interprete, please. O Spanish.
¿En inglés o qué?
Español.
¿Español? Ok. Tenemos a alguien en Zoom y va a ayudarle.
Okay.
So, hable despacio y déle oportunidad para que él diga lo que está diciendo.
Okay.
Edgar, we have someone, if you can assist with the translation. Thank you.
Yes. Can you guys hear me?
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es
Yes.
José Garduño, residente de Indio por 34 años.
Good afternoon. My name is Jose Garduño. I've been a resident of Indio for 34 years.
Me paro aquí ante el concilio al alcalde Belmont para abogar por un futuro del cual mi familia, amigos, comunidad puedan tener una vivienda digna en nuestra ciudad.
I am here in front of the council, in front of the city to fight and advocate for my family for us to have a fair and just housing in the city.
Y esto empieza con ustedes, que tienen a su disposición una manera de acelerar y incrementar viviendas exigibles.
And this starts with you guys that have the accessibility to provide accessible and affordable housing.
Para nuestras comunidades pueden hacer esto, incluyendo a su personal de hagan la posible por aplicar al programa de asignación Proviviendas.
And this can be done by bringing the communities into pro-housing developments.
Otra cosa. Gracias.
Another thing.
Viviendo yo aquí en la ciudad de Indio por 34 años, soy una persona que paseo mucho por la ciudad de Indio, el cual la ciudad de Indio me brinda mucha confianza.
Living here as a resident for 34 years, I'm the type of person that walks around a lot and enjoys the city, and the city brings me a lot of comfort.
Lo único que me da vergüenza que en los parques de Indio no tenemos baños para nuestras familias, que da vergüenza que los niños hagan del baño donde los mira la gente.
What I am ashamed of is the restrooms in our public parks. We don't have parks for our kids and families to go comfortably without being seen by other people.
Principalmente en el Chin, en el Tenchin que está por la Clinton, hay muchas familias que van a divertirse con sus niños y el cual no hay ningún baño.
especially the park on Clinton, where a lot of families go to enjoy with their kids, and there's no restrooms.
En la Mayo pasa lo mismo. Sabemos que hay mucha gente indigente, pero podemos llegar a un acuerdo en que sí se puede.
And I agree, there's a lot of homeless people, but we can come to an agreement where we can make this possible.
Nuestra comunidad lo merece.
Our community deserves it.
Somos gente trabajadora y no somos gente de violencia.
We are hardworking people. We are not violent people.
Estamos en esta ciudad de Indio donde sí se puede, porque nuestra comunidad lo merece. Una de las cosas que se está mirando que la gente apoya a la comunidad.
And we are in the city where we deserve this, and we are in a city where we want to give support to the community.
Yo de mi parte les doy las gracias porque he sido una persona que miro la visualidad del concilio, que están trabajando, pero se les ha olvidado muchas cosas de que nuestra gente es primero.
And I want to thank you for all your work. I'm here and I've seen a lot of what you've done, but I think sometimes you forget that the people come first.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Hey, we have one more. So Augustine, I don't want to butcher your last name, so I can't read it.
You got it right.
All righty.
And after that, Mayor, I have Sandra on Zoom, and I believe she'll also need translation. So
Absolutely. Great.
Thank you, Mayor Furman and City Council members. Good afternoon. My name is Agustin Ariola. I am the Senior Implementation Manager at Lift to Rise. Lift to Rise convenes the Housing Collaborative, also known as the Housing Stability CAN, which comprises about 70 local cross-sector stakeholders, including the city of Indio. And we're organized around radically increasing the supply of affordable housing here in the Coachella Valley. I wanted to take a moment to congratulate you on being the first city in the Valley to have a certified housing element update and stress the importance of adopting a resolution to apply for HED's pro-housing designation program. As shared in the presentation, it's going to take a lot of funding, it's going to take a lot of effort, but it's something that without doubt benefit the city of Indio and other jurisdictions, because historically our region has struggled to compete for resources to support affordable housing production. The pro-housing designation helps level the playing field, not just here, but around the entire Coachella Valley. Many of the policies that you already have in place and those that are in the works can count towards earning the designation. The Housing CAN committed to helping all 9 cities in the Coachella Valley earn their designation by June 2024. And Lift to Rise, as well as our partners and HCD, can provide technical assistance and support with your applications. We strongly encourage you to apply and offer our support throughout the process. Thank you for your time.
Ready. Thank you for your comments, sir. Have some online.
Okay, Sandra, tienes 3 minutos.
¿Me pueden escuchar?
Sí, si tienes 3 minutos y si puedes hablar despacito para que podamos ayudarte.
Ok. Buenas tardes, alcalde y miembro del concilio. Mi nombre es Sandra Tolento y he sido residente de la ciudad de Indio por 8 años.
Good afternoon. My name is Ana Polanco, and I've been the resident of Indio for the last 8 dijo o 18?
8
years.
No es secreto que estamos en una crisis por falta de vivienda asequibles en la ciudad en la ciudad y en el valle.
And it's not a secret that we are in a drought here in the city and in the valley.
Por eso estoy aquí hoy, porque como residente es mi responsabilidad abogar por mi comunidad.
That's why I'm here as a resident, to advocate for my community.
Ustedes como concilio pueden tomar decisiones que impacten de manera positiva a nuestra ciudad.
And you as a council can make a positive changes that can impact our community in a positive way.
Como instruir a su personal de que hagan lo posible para aplicar el programa de designación pro vivienda del Estado.
Like, do whatever you can to have your employees or your team advocate for the housing program from the city or the state.
De esta manera demuestran que están tomando pasos para asegurarse de que nuestra ciudad siga avanzando por todos y no solo por pocos.
And this way you will ensure that the city keeps advancing for all, not just for some.
Mi esposo y yo estamos muy interesados en poder comprar nuestra primer casa para nuestra familia.
My husband and I are very interested in purchasing our first home for our family.
aquí en Indio, pero después de varios intentos sin éxito,
here in Indio, but after several failed attempts,
nos encontramos en un tiempo realmente difícil con los precios de casas y renta realmente excesivos.
we find ourselves in a very difficult time with the prices of housing and rentals.
Así que es una gran oportunidad de que Indio pueda ser un ejemplo para las ciudades vecinas y puedan darles oportunidad a nuestros residentes de Indio. Gracias.
So it's a great opportunity for India to be an example to neighboring cities and give the residents the chance they deserve. Thank you.
That's all I have, Mayor.
Well, there's no further public comments. So what I'd like to do now is go back to the consultant and pose those questions, and we can open up the discussion.
Give us 1 second, Mayor.
Okay.
Well, Elizabeth's working on there, Mayor. Just to emphasize the point about availability of grant funding. As the council's aware, we're pursuing a very large grant for the Jewel community through the Transformative Climate Communities Program. And yesterday we were on a call with the state agency that administers that grant program, and they asked us the question of whether we had a pro-housing designation. So it is a topic for pursuing grant funding. That's an example. I think Elizabeth is ready now.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Yeah, apologies. Hopefully everyone could see my screen now. It wasn't showing up as an option for me for a second there. So just a glitch in the matrix. So yeah, we can get back to kind of our prompting questions, I think. Thank you to all those who provided public comments. And yeah, I think we want to go back to hearing from the council. So if it's preferred, I can go one question at a time, or I can briefly take you through all the questions, and then you can just provide whatever feedback seems best to you.
I think if you go through all the questions and then we could just give input as we go, or actually when you're done with the questions, we could chime in at the conclusion.
Okay, perfect. So first question we have here are, what are your thoughts on obtaining a pro-housing designation from the state? So again, we have the pro-housing values tied with actions. These are values that you already hold, but of course there would be actions that would need to be implemented. But at the kind of other level, there's the state designation itself. All right, let's see, there it is. Then we want to hear from you about what other items you'd like us to study through our pro-housing research. And after I go through these, I can go back to that slide so you can see what those components are that we're going to be looking at through this research that we're doing. And then finally, based on the 4 pro-housing policy categories, which I have listed here, 1 through 4, and those examples that we presented to you, we want to understand what your priority focus is. And really the key thing to note here is that for the first category, favorable zoning and land use, this is really something that the city is already making a lot of efforts to work towards. So what we'd like to see is what your 2 focus areas might be for these other 3 categories. So accelerating housing production timeframes, reducing construction and development costs, and providing financial subsidies. So that is all I have, and I will go back up to that slide so you can look at the pro-housing strategies plan work in case that helps kind of inform the discussion a little bit more.
Great, thank you. Now, I mean, with that being said, council would like to chime in, and somebody like to start it off.
I'll start it off.
There we go. Oh, I forgot.
Thank you, Mayor, for the opportunity to speak on this topic. I think throughout my tenure on the Indio City Council, we have been nothing more than pro-housing. So I can't think of a situation or a circumstance where any of us would want to not become a pro-housing designated city by the state of California. That's something that if that's going to help us bring the diversity of housing that we've been talking about is going to be very beneficial. And the consultants did show today where that gap is in housing for us. We recognized it when we were going over this plan the last time the consultants were here And we want that housing. We want to expand to include all that housing that is missing. We just need the help to get there. So as far as favorable zoning and land use, I'm supportive of exceeding the state density bonus. I'm supportive of reducing or eliminating parking requirements. I'm supportive of establishing a workforce housing zone or a housing sustainability district. I'm supportive of streamlining programmatic CEQA analysis. I'm supportive of permit processing under 4 months. I believe in fast tracking, and I'm supportive of limiting of 3 or less hearings for any project, which I think is currently our standard, and priority permitting for ADUs, multifamily, and affordable housing. Now, as to the 3 questions that the consultant asked specifically, well, number 1, yes, I'm pro-housing, and I'd love to have the state designation. As far as what are the areas that we need to research and study? Well, we just need to know what the policies are that we can implement to get us there. We need the roadmap. And once we have the roadmap, then we have something that we can implement. And as far as the 2 priorities, I would ask for accelerated timeframes and for favorable zoning and land use designations to help us achieve our housing needs. And I hope that answers all the questions. Thank you, Dudek.
Great. I think that would conclude the meeting. That was good. Thank you, Council Member, for your insight and for the historical point and vision of our city.
A few thoughts came to mind when Ms. Vargas made the comment about migrant farm workers, that need is so strong here. It is such a huge need for the retired migrant farm workers. I know there's some housing there adjacent to the rescue mission. I know there's some apartments on Monroe, but these are people that have worked in the fields without pensions, without anything, and now they need the respect of a place to live, and that has always been something that's very, very important to me that we need to look into. Certainly, pro-housing designation would like to definitely support it and would like to move forward with it at every level. The only area that I think that concerns me is the parking restrictions. We certainly can loosen them up, but we need to make sure that there are enough places for people to park. That's a conversation we need to have. Accelerated timeframes, land use designations, yes, and yes. It's something that we need to do. There are so many areas. We have over 5,000 affordable houses in the city of Indio, and yet we probably need 5 times that amount. So the extent to which we can get things, the various types of affordable housing in our community to meet the needs of our population I'm very supportive.
That concludes your comments.
Yes, it sure is.
Councilman Rowe?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I concur with the pro-housing strategy, but it's in the details of what it actually comes down to. How available is the grants going to be with us changing our policies, and how competitive are we going to be against places like LA where they have an abundance of legislators and funding that always seems to go to those locations. So how we position ourselves and what we're willing to give up. I don't have any problems with any of the policies. I do agree with Elaine on the parking, because if you go down to King Street or some of the other streets, there's so many cars on the parking on the street there. It provides small crimes, but also at the same time, all the trash cans out in the middle of the street because everybody's parked along the sidewalk. So abundance of parking, I think, has to be looked at as the way the community will look, and the pride of the community as a whole, I think, goes along with parking. But I think it needs to be other kinds of housing too. We haven't looked at mobile homes. We have some of the very nice modular mobile homes out here. They're $150,000 to $200,000 planted. You got a community. You don't have a lot of water use because there's not a lot of grasses. It's a community park, so you're not talking a lot of individual yards. The cost goes down, and we have some beautiful sites out here. So I think there's some opportunities to do some starter homes. But when you start looking at overall funding, I think the state of California is one of our biggest burdens. They continue to follow with regulations if they want to have housing, like the city of Indio. If we wanted to give somebody some of our property to build some housing, it kicks in prevailing wage. So they have to have other grants from other organizations to be able to cover those costs, where if they really want us to build housing, they need to stop the obstacles that are involved with us. And they owe us millions of dollars from our housing fund that they've never paid us from our redevelopment agency. And if they would give us anywhere, I don't know how much it is now, between $3 and $6 million, depending on how much they've given us, we could use that to pay to help support affordable housing and housing elements out here. So there's some things that the state can do to help us with it. I'm for pro housing if it'll get us to the opportunities that we need. And we do need to come up with a variety of houses in different locations. And Ms. Vargas, as she was talking about, I have no problem putting multiple housing on the other side of I-10. I think it should be along the freeway there and to other places. And if we can come up with a selection of the opportunities that they've given us that we feel comfortable with, fast tracking, all the other things that come with it, grants, opportunities, as long as it kicks in, I'm good with it. I think we've all agreed that we need multiple types of housing, but I think it's how we get there is going to be the big question. But there are opportunities. So.
Yeah, for me, I think I definitely agree with pursuing the pro housing designation. I think one of the things we need to look at is working with the county and Live to Rise. I know they have the project pipeline that they have online. So I was looking through there today to see all the different projects that are already in progress. And I think working with the county to see what they can fund and then how we can complement their efforts to combine our efforts into getting some of these across the finish line, but then also being able to coordinate with them so that we can meet these 4 requirements for the pro housing designation. The accelerated timeframes, I would support, if we could see accelerated timeframes for permitting low income and moderate income homes. Looking at also, when we look at subsidizing, would it be better to subsidize ourselves or look at the option that Live to Rise is also pursuing the Catalyst Fund, that they're working with the state and the county so they can have revolving funds for housing projects throughout the area. I'm sure that would probably qualify as well for the pro housing designation. One question, well, first, I think across the freeway as well, I agree with Ms. Vargas here that we should look at some zoning that would include multifamily across the freeway as well, so we could spread out some of the multifamily developments. And then the housing opportunity zone, I did want to hear a bit more about that. What does that entail? What does that require from us? And how does that help us increase the housing production in those areas? That's all I have. Thank you.
Great.
Here, if I can just make one last comment. A significant portion of our homeless population are seniors. Their Social Security doesn't cover places to live or homes or apartments, and so as we move forward and support this, I think one of the additional elements I would like us to consider seriously is homes for our seniors. They need to be off the streets. They need to also be able to have a home to live. And veterans. Yeah, there's a lot of subsets of our community that need a place that has a roof over their head and a place to call home. Thank you, Mayor. That ends my comments.
Thank you. I think it goes without saying. I think we all support this. So I support designation pro housing of our city. We're the biggest city in the Coachella Valley, and as Indio moves, the rest of the valley usually moves. And we have such a diverse population. I think we have to break it down and start addressing issues for different folks. We talk about zoning and land use. That's big, because we need to really look at our map and see what we could zone for some of those different types of diverse housing. I think we all understand that we need to diversify our living situation in our city, and we have the land and potential to do it. So I think that's a place to start. And I also like to commend our council and staff for having some of these policies and things already in place. There's some wheels already in the motion in our city of addressing some of these issues that I have to say that some other cities can't say locally. And so we have been really addressing some of these issues, and I have to tip my hat off to our council and staff for doing that. As far as we talked about actually Ms. Vargas brought up overcrowding. That's part of our parking issue that we have now in some of our communities. It's because some folks have 2 or 3 families living inside of their house. And that's a direct result of having no affordable housing or obtainable housing. And I think when we look at how we build our city out and how we continue to move and summon our businesses here and open up and support our local small businesses, we have to take the mind frame of having affordable living, because I cannot put apartment complex way on the north side of the freeway where there's no schools, churches, places to shop. So we have to look at those amenities that are close by and start designating those open spaces so folks do not have to go too far. They could walk to the grocery store. They could walk to school if they're a student at College of the Desert, if they're working downtown. So we have to look at it from that perspective as well as an affordable living issue, not just affordable or obtainable housing. And also it was brought up, what's the roadmap? I think we need to really utilize our partners for that. The city doesn't do that. I think we're well on our way of taking care of this, but we really need to utilize our partners and continue doing that, I should say. And I think we could make this happen. And by doing this, it also opens us up to more grants and subsidies from our state and federal partners, because as we know, and dealing with developers, they don't make money off of affordable housing. Affordable housing starts from the ground up. So we need to really go after that funding and working with our partners at the state, local, and federal level to get in those funding and start looking at those triplexes, duplexes, and other innovative ways of housing our folks and taking care of the people, who really support our economy. And that's our farm workers, our retirees, our seniors, our veterans. Without those folks, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be thriving like we are. So we really have to focus on those groups as well. So I really appreciate the discussion. I appreciate this coming forward, and I appreciate the comments. And, I have to just say and finish with this is there's already some wheels in motion, and our staff's done a good job of, and our council has of passing policy and really looking at land use in our city to support initiatives like this. So I know we support this and looking forward to going to the next step, whatever that might be. So go ahead.
I also think specifically for resources that we should look at when pursuing this. I know we'll have by the end of the year 3.8 million, right, in our housing fund. 3.5 million in our housing fund. So seeing maybe that would maybe go into the reducing development cost or subsidizing some of these projects. And then as far as land as well, I know we own some land here in the downtown. I know we have a lot in front of the museum. And we have some small lots around downtown as well, and maybe looking at possibly designating those for affordable housing developments.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not a developer, and I don't know how this goes, but I don't want to put or make a whole district of just affordable housing. I like to mix them in. I like some folks to have some options downtown in a new community where it's affordable. I don't want everybody over on Calhoun, or I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's equitable. That's why really looking at north of the freeway, we're expanding, and it's all single family homes or gated community, which we're going away from. Let's look at how we could mix those folks in there. And, my train of thought is, if we all started somewhere, but it's where you're going. And if you could see that vision of what you're looking at next door, if you want to go there, you're going to work harder for that. You're going to seek those opportunities. So I like to mix folks in that. And I just hope that we do that, just don't put affordable just in one location.
So then in that case, would we look at possibly using the housing funds to purchase land on the other side of the freeway to use for development, or?
I might just jump in on that point, just because we may receive a request within the next 10 days to do just that north of the freeway on Avenue 44, close to Golf Center Parkway. So it's already happening. In fact, the mayor referred to the different areas and spreading these things out. We have 400 units under construction on Jefferson south of 111. We have city land that the city council's tentatively agreed to grant at no cost to LS Management. That's along Highway 111, about Madison, that rough area, that roughly that area. Not that it's a rough area. And then we have this on 44 I referred to. We have some near Winco back that side, some multifamily proposals. Is a lot in the wicket. So it's how do we help make sure they do it the way you want it, meeting these requirements of parking and meeting these lower income levels. There may need to be a subsidy, whether it's in the land cost or we talk to them saying we need to get 10 extremely lows out of this. That will come at a cost. And these funds that we have available could be used to help create those extremely low or those lower level income units that they will probably shy away from without an incentive.
Yeah.
Purchasing land isn't the answer. It's providing incentives and providing subsidies in others ways, because if a city purchases land, we have to purchase it at appraised value. And to be honest with you, you can get things 50% cheaper on the private market. So purchasing land is not the answer. The answer is working with the developer to see how we can help them get to where we need them to get.
Yeah, and I was going to say that, and without kicking in as much of the prevailing wage and other stuff, if we can defer the fees, do stuff that's not going to kick in to keeps the cost down. It's the cost that kill them. They're getting killed already from materials and labor because of the stuff that's going on, and then you add on our fees and the other stuff that goes through it. How we work with the Valley Sanitation District, how we work with the Water District to lower those down. I mean, Valley Sanitation is extremely difficult, and so is CVWD on the flood control. I mean, you knew the 480 apartments we have on Jefferson. They wanted to make them line the channel. I mean, out of the blue, there's $2 or $3 million off the top. So we really got to partner with some of these groups, and we need to look at possibly the tribes too to see if there's an opportunity for us to work with them on some of their properties to be able to go ahead, because they're, as a sovereign nation, have different rights than we do, and maybe they'll be willing to partner with us on some housing that would benefit them and benefit us.
And IID is part of that list you just
and we're working on those things, and I think what we also have to do is keep open mind when we look at new housing options. We historically went for the single family or just these big apartment complexes. There's different models out there, that have, cottages, courtyard housing, the tiny homes, because we're going to have students here and people who work downtown who, if there was, 10 or 20 tiny homes in a close area, that would work for them, until they're out of school or whatever they're going to do. So I think we just have an open mind when we start moving forward, because people are knocking at the door, and if people are going to live and work and play in Indio, they need places to live. So
I just want to mention that we're not the ones dictating the product type. It's the developers, the builders that are meeting the market demand, but we can certainly widen our scope of interest so that they know that we are casting a wide net and incentivizing the type of housing that we really want to build a higher inventory on. You are right, Mayor. We have historically been a single family dwelling community, but that has not been our choice. That has been what the market has demanded. So if we create incentives and policies that are pro-housing and encourage other product types, then developers will look at our city differently.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, this has been great input. I think it's very clear what's on the horizon. There's a question to answer. Mayor Pro Tem will get that research done on what those districts might mean, the different strategies that we can bring back to have you implement to move this forward and to make the formal application, which I think unanimously you're asking us to make. So thank you.
Well, so thank you to our consultants, and thank you, Mr. Snyder, for bringing this to us. Great presentation and great discussion by our council, and looking forward to working with you. And thank you for the community members who showed up and for the input. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor, Council.
Yeah. So that will conclude our study session, and we're going to go into close. So now, do I need another roll call?
Yes, Mayor. So you open the meeting. Yes. For the record, all council members are present.
Okay. Do we have any items for closed session that are not on the agenda?
None, Mayor.
Okay, then we'll adjourn the closed session for the items listed below and item 3.1 to 3.4.